Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 6th October 2024, where we will be discussing 9 important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now in the very first article, we'll be discussing about the biggest Maoist encounter in recent times, and we'll be looking into the various aspects of left-wing extremism in the country. In the second article, we'll be discussing about the hidden pandemic of superbugs, or on the scenario of the antimicrobial resistance and how it is a dangerous aspect for the entire human race. Now, in the simplified portion, we'll be discussing further 7 articles which are extremely important for the exam point of view. So, stay tuned. Hello students, I hope you all are doing well. So with this, we'll be starting the very first article. In this first article, we'll be talking about a major breakthrough in the government's approach against the Maoists. And here, recently, the bodies of, in the past week, almost 31 Naxalites were killed in the government operations against the Naxalites. And this is a very important piece of article and a topic of his syllabus where we have to discuss about the Naxalism or the left-wing extremism extent in our country. So this is extremely important for our prelims examination, where we have to look into the current events of national and international importance. Also, we have to look into the topics of GS3, where we have the aspects of internal security, where the non-state actors here constitute the Naxalites or the Maoists or the left-wing extremism topic with regard to our exam. Now, let us start discussing the very basics first. Now, the origin of the story, or the origin of Naxalites, or the origin of left-wing extremism goes back to 1967 with reference to a rebellion that took place at Naxalbari in West Bengal. Now, what happened in Naxalbari is that the peasants, the agricultural laborers, they rose up against arms against the landed, settlers of that particular village. Those landed village people were actually the people with properties with agricultural land, and they used to hire the peasants and the other laborers to work on their fields. So what happened on this particular day, the rebellion took place and it led to a very violent kind of a rebellion during that time. And after that, Charu Majumdar, who was actually a very well-known political activist back then in the political circles in West Bengal, he started mobilizing these landless peasants and the other groups of people who were generally belonging to the vulnerable sections of the population, who were generally from the backward areas of a particular state or of a particular village of a particular country. And he started mobilizing them and started teaching them about the various ideologies of the left, where he talked about how this landless peasants should be having some land rights of their own, some economic rights of their own, and also how they should be also owning the means of production. And essentially the entire ideals of Charu Majumdar followed the main ideology of Mao Zedong. Now Mao Zedong, right, his ideology, which was actually followed in China, believed in the capturing of the means of production, either be it by force or by military affairs. And this is when the main aspect here in this particular rebellion, which was led by Charu Majumdar, tried to transform the entire political sentiment and the a rebellion sentiment in that particular area and orient it towards the Maoist ideology. Now, after this particular event, there were huge levels of protests, huge level of rebellions in subsequent other areas of the West Bengal, and gradually it also started spreading from West Bengal to other states such as Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and some other areas, where generally the areas where it spread to were generally the forested regions, and within those regions mainly it was seen that the ST, the scheduled tribes, the scheduled castes, and several other backward sections of the populations back then used to be a part of this rebellion. And we have to understand, the government took a severe step against this particular movement, because according to Charu Majumdar, according to Maoist principles, right, we have to understand the people have to take arms against the government. So that was actually a kind of a revolution where the people must be taking up the means of production by overthrowing the democratic rule, which is not having any ethical or moral base, and also not having any democratical base in a country such as India. So that is where we have to understand the government immediately took steps to arrest Charu Majumdar, and eventually in 1972 Charu Majumdar passed away in judicial custody. And after this, we understand, after the death of Charu Majumdar, the Red Corridor, which is actually the areas, as we can see in this map here, this map is as of 2007, when the left wing extremism or Maoists were the most active in the country. It spread to this amount of states, as we can see, West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, parts of Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and some other areas of the country. So this is what we actually know as Red Corridor, or the states affected by, say, Naxalism. And here from 1990s, the government started responding very brutally. So government tried to mobilize the various security forces, have various raids, have various operations against them. And in 2004, the CPI Marxist-Leninist organization and another organization were merged to form the CPI Maoist, which is still a banned organization in the country as of now, according to UAPA. Now, what happened? 40 groups were kind of merged into CPI Maoist, and which is actually also banned as of now, and they started spreading violence all across the country. As we can see, just within 2 to 3 years, the violence spread to around 200 districts in the country, where the Maoists were using advanced technologies such as grenades, rocket launchers, AK-47s, which were mobilized against the Indian security forces, which also led to a huge amount of loss of lives for our Indian policemen, for our Indian armed forces, and the various paramilitary forces in the country. And here, one of the worst attacks on the Indian security personnel were carried out in 2010, which was termed as the Dantewada attack, where the Indian military and the Indian armed forces, they suffered huge amount of losses. So that is when Indian government actually became more and more stringent with this particular organization and this particular movement. Now, before we move on, we have to discuss about some of the brief amount of causes of left-wing extremism in the country. Now, according to 2006 D. Bandyopadhyay Committee, firstly, we have to understand that the socio-economic inequities were perpetuated by high amount of industrialization, clearing the lands for agriculture, which led to the mass displacement of the local tribal populations. So generally the local leaders tried to mobilize them, that your government is not doing anything, that your local police is oppressing you, the zamindars are oppressing you, they are taking away your lands, there is no amount of law and order for you. So that is why you have to raise up in arms against the state and the state government and the central government. So that is where this is the very first cause, that the leaders there, the local leaders, they tried to exploit the local people. Secondly, it was also the failure of the land reforms, because we know as of now that the land reforms were not effectively implemented in the country after independence. Next, also the political marginalization and the lack of representation of the tribal populations, of the SC population at the state level, at the central level, was also one of the reasons for the same. Fourth, exploitation and displacement due to industrialization is a major cause. Not only industrialization, but also clearing the lands for agriculture. This displaced them, and also this planted the seeds of anti-capital tendencies in this, in the minds of the Naxalites. And we also have, the reasons of lack of access to basic services when it came to education, when it came to health, when it came to electricity, when it came to basic infrastructure such as roads and the various aspects of the social infrastructure in those areas. They were also poor, due to which the tribal populations were also very much discontent with the government. And finally, the tribal sections of the population, they were also subjected to various laws and regulations with reference to forest, right? For example, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, right, and also the recent Forest Rights Act of 2006. So these are all the various amounts of legal impediments that the tribal population felt that they were being imposed upon this. So that is why we have to understand these were the many causes, and what led to the impact of the left-wing extremism in the country. Firstly, we have to understand that the rising amount of left-wing extremism in the country impeded the economic development and also the destruction of infrastructure in the local area. because we have to understand, if majority of the youth, if majority of the population is involved in violence against the state, then economic development, economic investments cannot be successful. So that is where this area suffered. Next, also the social inequalities that were earlier existing, right, they were further exacerbated, because obviously if there are no economic incentives, say social infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, or physical infrastructure such as roads, right, basic roads, if they cannot be built, then the local population is bound to suffer. Next, it was also having a big amount of strain on the government resources, as we can see from 2000 to 2023, right, and also with reference to the security personnel and the civilian population there, right, there have been high amount of losses of lives according to yearly death reports. Also, if we talk about the deaths recently in 2022-23, the deaths of our own security personnel were 10 and 22 respectively in 2022-23. So this is where we have to understand the death toll is still high, and the government is also having to invest a lot of money in this particular say affair to get rid of the left-wing extremism. Then it is also fostering a climate of violence and insecurity in the region. People and the youth, they are being threatened with various amounts of violence, due to which they cannot also resort to other means. It is also disrupting the education and healthcare services in affected areas. So this is where we have to understand the impacts are very serious, due to which the government have also taken many initiatives. Firstly, it is by increasing the presence of the CRPF, NIA and ED in the regions. Second, it is also led by the modernization of the forces, be it the police forces, be it the various armed forces, or say the paramilitary forces, with their amount of technology, the amount of guns that they use, and the vehicles that are being deployed in the region to combat the left-wing extremism. Next, Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act of 2015. They also give protection to various children who are involved in this conflict, and they give some exceptions to the children who are affected by the violence, because we understand that the children are very susceptible to radicalization by the local cadres of the left-wing extremists leaders, and that is where we have to understand that we have to protect the children from violence and giving them asylum in the future. So that is also given under this particular act. Then the government is also very successful in implementing something which we know as the Aspirational Districts Program, which is all about uplifting the weaker sections of the population all across the country, across the districts which are affected by left-wing extremism, across the districts which are having very low levels of social economic indicators, right, and also various other parameters are selected to actually shortlist the districts where development needs to be stepped up. So the government of India has actually selected those areas in the country which have been mostly affected by the left-wing extremism, and is trying to ramp up the education services, the health services, and the overall administration and the governance aspects in those regions. Next, the security-related expenditure has also increased in this particular region by giving more and more funds to the state governments, the concerned state governments, to fight the LWE. Next, the special infrastructure scheme to build better amount of say roads and better amount of infrastructure in the in this particular states, they are also released. The road connectivity project, particularly under the PM Gram Sadak Yojana, as we also have discussed in the Analyst recently, right? So that is also having a special part within this particular sector. Then we have the LWE Mobile Tower project to improve the communications in the region. We also have the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act of 1996, which is having the various provisions to grant more and more autonomy towards these regions. Next, we have the Civic Action Program to involve more and more of the civilians in the action against the LWE. And also, we also have the surrender and rehabilitation policies for the, say, Maoists or the Naxalites who are surrendering to the police forces for a better life ahead. So they can also have a second chance at life by surrendering their, say, previous actions. Also, there is interstate coordination between the various states and the government of India. And also, as we have seen, right? We also have say good amount of doctrine which is known as samadhan. As we can see, the full form of each and every term is given here. So this is also a kind of a doctrine which is trying to tackle the LWE menace, and for your mains answers it is extremely important that you use this kind of keywords to get that extra marks. And here we also have the various state governments taking various initiatives, such as Andhra Pradesh has taken initiatives which is a kind of a police action against the Maoists, which is by the name of Greyhounds. The Maharashtra has involved the local police and has formed the C-60 force against them. The Chhattisgarh government is also say continuing the Salwa Jurum and also is having the district reserve guard. In Jharkhand, we have the Jharkhand Jaguars against them. In West Bengal, the area surrounding Jangal Mahal is also kind of having various say confidence building measures with the Naxalites, the local population and the local police. In Odisha, the interventions and Koraput is also yielding some results. As we can see in this Odisha, right, 29 road projects have been sanctioned by the central government, and also as we can see, one Eklavya Vidyalaya, which is an education institute dedicated to the local tribal populations. Apart from this, we also have seen the BSNL towers and the connectivity reaching there. And also, as we can see, major Maoist encounters in this particular year, as we can see, right, there have been increasing amounts of say police action and the government of India action against the Maoists, which is actually leading to say a lot of deaths among the Maoist leaders, which is a good sign, because we have to understand we have to get rid of this menace as soon as possible, because at one point of time, according to various policy circles in the country, Maoism or say Naxalism was the biggest internal security threat to the country. And this is where we have to understand how to work ahead, or what is the way ahead in this particular issue. Firstly, we must be undertaking development at a very faster pace, and we have to understand that development is the only solution, because if we have to understand, if once the local population, the local people there is getting the benefits of good education, food and various say hospitals and proper amount of physical infrastructure, then they will stop supporting the Naxalites. We also need grassroots democracy to penetrate to the lower levels, which is where we have to understand, we have to implement the provisions of the PESA Act, we have to implement the provisions of decentralization further and in a better way. We have to also understand the security imperative of the region. We have to step up the security forces, we have to carry out more and more encounters to reduce the hostilities in the region. We have to also look into confidence building measures between the local people and the various stakeholders involved. And finally, we have to involve the community in various aspects. We can attract the private investments, we can involve the community, we can build various self-help groups and also farmer producer organizations. We can give them the technology to have various aspects of say entrepreneurship, startups. This is when the local population will be benefiting from them and not from the violence being perpetuated. And that is why recently some of the state governments they are taking good measures. For example, this is the case of Chhattisgarh and Odisha. Chhattisgarh is offering interest-free loans for students in Maoist affected regions, which is giving the students a better life or say a better life beyond any kind of violence. Next, the Swabhiman Anchal, which is was actually a Maoist say bastion in Odisha, has been reclaimed through development. And also, once we look at the various other initiatives carried out by the Odisha government, it is also say at Malkangiri, which is trying to not only look at the overall development of the regions of the local people, but also is trying to promote air travel, tourism, trade in this particular region. So these are all the things that we must be understanding for this particular topic. Now, there is a men's practice question for you all. You please let me know some of your insights into this particular question, particular topic in the comment section below. And the question is that discuss the causes and impacts of left-wing extremism in India. How far is the government of India successful against the same? So please do let me know, and we will be moving on to the next topic. In the next topic, we'll be discussing about the hidden pandemic of superbugs. Now, superbugs here resemble the various harmful bacteria or various harmful amounts of microorganisms who have mutated to become immune against the major drugs or say the major medicines that we use for our day-to-day purposes. So what happened, that these kind of microorganisms, they have become resistant to the medicines that we generally use on a day-to-day basis, and hence they are known as superbugs, or the bugs or the microorganisms which do not respond to any basic drugs as of now, and hence posing a very high risk to the lives and livelihoods of people, and the people also who are dependent on these drugs for various other serious cases. So this is where we have to discuss the entire aspect here. So this is what we have to understand. There is a silent pandemic where the superbugs are being spread via our hospitals, via our food chain, via our interactions with day-to-day say activities and so on. So this is where we have to discuss, because it is a very important topic with reference to prelims, where we have to discuss about general science. We have to also discuss about various issues pertaining to the social sectors, education, health and so on. So where we have to discuss in this particular article, we have to be limited to the health aspect here. Now, as we discussed in the beginning, this is a silent pandemic. Why? Because we understand that, take the example of these many bacteria, and for example, the yellow bacteria are completely normal bacteria where the normal drugs can generally kill these bacteria. For example, say if there is a disease which is being caused by this bacteria, and if I take the drug, right, that drug will be killing or eliminating these bacteria. But once this particular bacteria have been eliminated, and if there was one drug resistant bacteria present between them, so that bacteria can now multiply because there is no other competition surrounding them. And once they multiply, this drug resistant bacteria try to spread all around the body of the particular person or the particular animal, right? And then they will be also trying to mutate further, right? Or they can also try to change their characteristics further. So this is why in this particular way, this particular pandemic is carrying on, because these kinds of bacteria are being spread all across countries, across continents. And here we have to understand that the antimicrobial resistance is actually the ability of microbes, bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites to resist the effects of medicines, which are antibiotics, antivirals and etc. So this is what we discussed. And this is a growing threat because infections are harder to treat right now, because now the bacteria have been immune to the recent drugs. So that is why maybe we need to have, which means that we maybe have to have higher dosage, higher power of this kind of drugs, and that is where this will be leading to higher cost and even death of the patients. And we have to understand what are the causes of AMR in the very first place. Firstly, it is about the misuse and overuse of microbials in our day-to-day life. How? Because we understand that whenever, we also see this in our case, that whenever we have any viral infection, don't we always pop in the paracetamol or the various other medicines that are easily available, or which we know as generic drugs? Yes, right? So this is actually one of the biggest reasons, because we know that any drug is actually having a kind of a dosage that you have to take 2 drugs in a day, 3 drugs in a day. So if we do not obey by that, if we do not take a doctor's prescription for the particular matter, then there are high chances that the bacteria that is present within our body, that the microbes which are very dangerous to us, that they become immune to the drugs over and over a period of time. Also, we understand that if we do not complete the full course, and also we have various amount of drugs which we feed the various animals, right, the poultry, the cattle, for which we have to increase their productivity, right? So the drug resistant microbes, they enter into the cattle, into the poultries, and they also try to spread the microbes across the food chain. When we consume the various agricultural items, the various animal husbandry items, so they actually transmit the microbes from their body to our own body. This is also transmitted via inadequate hygiene followed by people at various hospitals, at various clinics, where due to exposure to various syringes or various hospital related infrastructure, the microbes or the AMR can be transmitted to us. And finally, we also have limited new antibiotics to fight or combat the superbugs, because these bugs, as we can understand, have mutated. their genetic code has been changed, and that is where the earlier line of drugs are no longer effective against them. And also the research and development on the superbugs as of now is also limited. So that is where we do not have much of the new medicines to combat them. So, and when we look at the data as of now, as we can see, right, India's antibiotic usage in 2001, they have increased by 62% to 2010. And also we understand that this is much more higher than even China and US globally. Right, as we can see in the entire world, right, India is quite say the user of various amounts of antibiotics. While it is a good thing, but mostly we understand that people do not carefully track medicines, as we have just discussed in the causes, and this has led to WHO ringing the alarm bells. The World Health Organization have actually listed priority 1, priority 2 and priority 3 types of superbugs, or the various bacteria which have developed immunity against the various drugs. So this is where we have to understand these kinds of priority 1, 2 and 3 say microbes are spreading all across the world, and that is why we must be taking some actions, because this means something, right? Firstly, we understand there is an increased amount of risks of mortality and morbidity, because we understand that these superbugs are extremely dangerous. They do not work against any drugs which were previously used, and they can cause more and more harm to the people. The economic burden of AMR is also substantial, which is leading to $100 trillion of loss, economic loss, right, by 2050. So in the future, it is leading to this amount of loss. So in the present, we understand we must be taking some actions. Next, it is also jeopardizing or kind of putting in danger the success of various surgeries, cancer treatments, etc. Because for surgeries, for cancer treatments, we need drugs. But if the bacteria or the microorganism, they have already been immune, then we cannot have a proper amount of, say, drugs which are working in this particular favor. Next, the impact on agriculture and food security is also very, very severe. Why? Because now the, say, various agriculturists or farmers or livestock breeders, they were using some, they were using some kind of medicines to protect their, livestock, to protect their crops. But now, if AMR is spreading all across the world, they have to change those feeds, they have to change their raw materials, due to which they will be having higher costs again, right? So this is where the entire agriculture and food security will also be at stake. And also, we understand finally, the global health inequality will also be prevalent, because obviously at the end of the day, because of higher amount of research and development, some new, say, medicine will be found out, which will be kind of controlling the superbugs, but that will be coming at high cost, high prices. Not everyone can afford them, and this will be also exacerbating or already worsening the high amount of inequality in the country, in the world, and they will be also being pertaining to this particular health sector, that will be increasing the inequality in the health paradigm. Now that is why the government of India has taken many actions. For example, firstly, the ICMR has been conducting various research and also having some of the, say, various policy guidelines to various pharmaceutical companies to frame proper amount of standard or procedures with reference to the antimicrobial resistance in India. Next, we also have the National Program of AMR Containment as of 2012, which is also trying to lay down various procedures and the guidelines regarding the same. We also have the AMR Surveillance and Research Network to look into the various, say, microbes, as we have seen here, priority 1, 2 and 3, and how fast they are spreading and where they are being detected and how they can be combated. Next, we also have the National Action Plan on AMR, which is trying to follow One Health approach. One Health approach is a very innovative kind of an approach which is trying to have a fresh outlook at human health, not only from human organism point of view, but also from an ecosystem point of view, because we understand that we as human beings, we live in an environment, right? We are not alone. We also have various other creatures living with us. And as we have seen in the corona pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, right, which was actually a virus transmitted by, bats or due to some other reasons which are not yet properly investigated as of now. But we know that possibly the source was an animal during the COVID-19 pandemic virus transmission phase. So that is where we have to understand that we are not, say, dissociated from our environment. So that is where we have to understand we must be adopting such an approach which will be kind of integrating not only human health but also our entire ecosystem's health, where we have to look into the proper amount of holistic and overall approach of the health sector. Next, we also have two more initiatives by the various global institutes all across the world pertaining to health. Firstly, we have the Global Antimicrobial Resistance and Use Surveillance System, which is a global system to surveil the same, and also the Global Points Prevalence Survey Methodology to precisely look into the AMR cases all across the world. And recently, we also have this very unique initiative by the Kerala government, which is known as the Operation Amrit, which is prohibiting the over-the-counter sales of antibiotics without any prescription. So which is actually a very good step done by a state government, so that various other state governments can be trying to emulate this particular best practice. You can also write this thing in your mains answers to enhance the quality of your answer. And in this respect, we have another question for all of you, that the question is that addressing the spread of antimicrobial resistance requires a coordinated global effort. Do you agree? Support your arguments and highlight the steps taken in this direction. Now in the comment section, you let me know one or two more steps that the government has taken to eradicate the antimicrobial resistance in the country. Now with this, we'll be moving on to the next topic. Now in the next topic, we have a very interesting article here which talks about an interview with Triloknath Pandit. Now Triloknath Pandit is actually a very well-known anthropologist in the country, and we will be looking into the topic of the Shompens tribes and also the Great Nicobar project. Now this is a very important topic for your prelims, where we have to discuss about current events of national and international importance, where we also have to look about mapping a little bit here, right, and also about GS3 infrastructure. Now when we talk about firstly about the Great Nicobar project, now this is a project which was proposed by the Niti Aayog Mega Infrastructure Project in one of its papers. And what happened? It is a plan to totally transform the Nicobar Islands, right? Firstly, we actually know that the name of the program is the Andaman and Nicobar Integrated Development Corporation, which will be trying to implement this program. And here we will be having an international container transshipment terminal, which will be catering to various cargo ships and the various shipping requirements of the country, right? Then we'll be also having a totally new airport to be built from scratch, which will be serving as or catering as an international airport. We'll be having a gas and solar power plants in the region to have a green kind of footprint for the entire region of Nicobar Islands. We'll be also having a city which also will be coming up from scratch as a greenfield city, right? So we have understood that we have some developmental projects lined up for Nicobar Islands, but we have to pause ourselves and we have to ask this question, whether this project will be suitable for the ecological interests, for the local interests of the region or not. And for your purpose, we have to also understand that the transshipment terminal and the international airport, as we can see here, they will be built on this particular stretch of the island, right? And also we have to understand that there are various concerns in this particular project. Firstly, we have to understand that these Nicobar Islands are home to the Shompens tribes, right? And we have to understand that according to 2021 census, there are only 229 members of the tribe. These aren't semi-nomadic people, and they have been resident on the island for around 60,000 years. So we can understand that they are quite unique, and their presence is also quite unique for India. But we understand, and also according to Triloknath Pandit, right, such major infrastructural projects will be totally displacing them. They will be displacing their livelihood, and they will be totally be destroyed. And also they are, the tribal population, they are also concerned that their girls, and women, they will be kidnapped, as also has been seen previously with reference to the various influx of foreigners in the region, right? So this is where we have to understand that such projects need to be consulted with the local population, because not only they are being affected, but apart from them, heavy amount of deforestation will be taking place, right? Deforestation and the development will be leading to loss of various amount of species of flora and fauna, such as Nicobar's wild pig, tree shrew, right, crested serpent, eagle. We also have the Nicobar Paradise Flycatcher, and the Nicobar Megapod. Now these names are extremely important for you. Why? Because in the examination we can be given these names and we can be asked as to which region they are found into, right? We also have, say, the great leatherback turtle and the Nicobar megapod, right? We also have huge amount of threat to the coral and marine ecosystem, right, where there is a huge amount of coral diversity there, and also threat to dugongs. Now this is where we have to understand that this particular project is posing such high amount of risk to not only the local tribal population but also the rest of the biodiversity of the region. Now for your information, let me tell you, Triloknath Pandit is actually the only individual as of now to have interaction with the Sentinelese tribal population. Now you let me know in the comment section, where are the Sentinelese tribal sections of the population located and why they are so unique. Accordingly, we have two PYQs from 2009 and 2019. You read the questions and you let me the answer in the comments below. In the next article, we'll be talking about a report which is talking about the performance of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in the country. Now, this is a very important topic for our prelims, where we have the economy and social development. Also for GST, we have to look into the Indian economy topics. Now here, when we talk about IBC or Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, firstly we have to distinguish between the terms of insolvency and bankruptcy. So firstly, when we talk about insolvency, it is a state of a person or a company to not meet the debt obligations, right? So this can be a company, this can be a person who has taken a loan from a bank or loan from any other person, right? Now that person is not being able to pay back, so this is a case of insolvency. Now when insolvency is legally declared, right, that becomes a bankruptcy case. That means bankruptcy can be defined as a legal status of an individual, right, or an entity who is unable to repay the financial debt it owes to the creditors, suppliers and the vendors. Now this is actually a very important scenario, because we know that as a country, right, we need to have more and more businesses. That is good, but we have to also look at the interest of the business owners, right? If they are not being, say, successful in running the business, they can shut down. They can shut down and have another business. So that is exactly the process of Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, of how to shut down the business and how to recover the various costs, the various debts out of that particular business. So what happens is that whenever we talk about any business operation, right, there are generally two types of creditors. Firstly, we have the operational creditors, or the people who supply raw materials to the particular company, or the employees of the firm. Also, on the other side, we have some financial creditors. Who are these financial creditors? They are generally the banks, as we can know from the, say, particular financial creditors itself, right? We have the banks, for example, who give loan to the various businesses. Now, for example, if a particular company, right, or some particular business individual or some partnership firms, right, LLP and companies, they default on, say, the loans that they have taken for business purposes, they will be, coming under the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code of India, right? And firstly, when we understand, when a particular business is not able to pay back the loans, it will be obviously the creditors who will be stressed, right? They would, for example, the employees, for example, the banks, they would want their money back. So what can generally happen, right? So they can approach the National Company Law Tribunal. The National Company Law Tribunal will be looking into the cases brought in by the various creditors, and they will be hearing the cases as to how the money can be recovered from the business, and they have to decide within 14 days whether the case should be pursued under Insolvency Bankruptcy Code or not. If the NCLT tells that yes, okay, we will be going with this particular matter, then insolvency professionals will be appointed. Insolvency professionals are experienced financial experts, right? They can be CAs, they can be various other financial experts who are appointed by the Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India, which is a statutory body under the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, who appoints various experts to look into the various companies who are stressed, who want to shut down their business after the NCLT has told yes. Next, what happens is that this particular insolvency professionals, they will be studying the balance sheets of the company. They will be looking into why the companies are making this kind of losses, and they will be presenting a kind of a plan to the various financial creditors, who are also known as a committee of creditors, right? So these financial creditors, they will be figuring out some way. For example, first way can be, to continue the business by maybe reducing the interest amount, by reducing the maybe loan amount, or the worst case scenario is to shut down the business. But merely shutting down the business will not be doing any good to the creditors who have lent the money, who have worked at their particular firms. So what happens? If the business is being shut down, then we have to liquidate. The liquidation means that we have to sell off the assets. We have to sell off the various assets of the company, right? Now, depending on what, say, one or two options which has been chosen by the creditors, right? That particular thing will be again be presented to the NCLT. Now, when say these creditors have either went with option 1 or option 2, whatever is the option. Next, when this case will again be presented to the NCLT, next the business owner can have a say in this particular aspect here. The business owner can tell that, okay, we can have further lower interest rate, or if I do not want to shut down, I can operate in a different way. So that is where the NCLT will be finally be deciding the case here, right? And if the stakeholders here are not happy with the NCLT decision, so they can also appeal. Right, they can appeal to, with reference to for individuals and partnerships, they can appeal to the debt recovery tribunals. In the case of companies, they can approach the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. Note that this is NCLAT. Earlier it was NCLT, right? So this is the entire process how this is particularly formed here. Now after NCLT admits a particular case, right, we have 180 days by which this particular process must be completed, because we have to ease the aspect of doing business in our country. So that is why we cannot have unlimited amount of days for the resolution process here. So that is why we have a time limit of 180 days. Now the main issue of implementation of this code here is about the various procedural delays which are happening in the implementation. As we can see from the report, while majority of the article is very technical in nature, we do not have to look into the various other details. We only have to look into these kind of points. Firstly, this is averaging 716 days, which is kind of very late, right? Also, the process of admitting is kind of having huge amount of delays with the NCLT, and if this delay is there at the NCLT stage, then we have an entire delay in the entire supply chain, which is causing a domino effect. Next, we also have the various creditors who require huge amount of haircuts on their various loans that they have given. For example, they have given a loan of 100 crores and for which the business owners have submitted various assets worth for example 50 crores, right? Now the banks are demanding more and more assets, more and more collateral, right? These are what we know as the haircuts, right? So the banks are demanding more and more collateral, because we have to understand that as of now, the present state of insolvency bankruptcy code, this is actually a creditor-led model, not a debtor-led. That means banks or financial creditors, operational creditors actually have more powers, have more say in the proceedings of the IBC. It is not always the debtor who is having the higher powers or higher say, because it is assumed that the debtor has made losses, so that particular person should not be having any say. But we have to understand, if we have to make doing business in India more easy, we have to also pay more attention to the debtor, right? Then there are various legal issues. Now, as we have just discussed, that when a particular case is submitted to the NCLT, that NCLT must be deciding within 14 days whether the NCLT should be saying yes or not, right? Now this 14 days sometimes is delayed, as we have seen, right? This can be sometimes in the genuine case. In 2022, the Supreme Court also told that submission within 14 days is not a mandatory provision, right? And that the NCLT has discretionary powers on deciding whether or not to admit the insolvency application. So there are some legal issues as to what the discretion should be or not, right? So they should be also considering the defaults, circumstances, and the debtors' arguments too. So the arguments must be more having a kind of a overall holistic way. So that is where the legal issues must also be sorted out. So these were the more important issues which were discussed in this article here. In the next article, we'll be looking into a very simple concept of how plants are affected due to global warming, which is a very important topic in prelims, where we have to discuss about the environmental ecology, biodiversity, and the impacts of climate change. In GS3, we also have to look into the conservation, environmental pollution, and degradation aspects. Now, this article is talking about how plants are affected during, say, climate change or say during global warming. Firstly, to understand the rest of the article, we have to understand what is a stomata. We understand that the function of a plant stomata is actually to facilitate the exchange of carbon dioxide which they intake and to facilitate the outgo of oxygen that they supply to the overall atmosphere. With this particular thing, we understand we not only have oxygen, we also have water vapor which escape the stomata of the plants, right? Plants on land have stomata on the underside of the leaves generally, and floating aquatic plants have stomata on the upper surface of the leaves, right? So these are the microscopic spores which help the plants breathe, and also they control how much water the plants must be evaporating, which is also a very, very important process in the, say, respiration system of the plants, right? These stomatal spores also enable and control the carbon dioxide intake for photosynthesis and growth. Now in the comment sections, can you let me know some of the products that the plants get out of photosynthesis? Let me see how your science and technology is. Now in this particular news, what we have to talk about is the recent research which took place in the new phytologist, right? Which is actually multi-pronged research. Firstly, we understand when we have global warming, we have high levels of atmospheric CO2, right, due to which global warming takes place. And we have to understand during high concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, right, this leads to the reduction of stomatal presence on the plants compared to the low CO2 atmosphere. As we can see, high levels of stomata. Now we have to understand some of the reasons behind the same. When we have a slight increase in temperature, what happens? This leads to the increase in photosynthesis. Why? Because we understand that this starts an increase in photosynthesis in the warming leaves, which results in reduction in carbon dioxide, right? So the stomatal pores open and then the plants can have more and more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But when the temperature starts to rise even further, right, photosynthesis is actually stressed in the plants, or it is becoming affected as of now. What happens is that when the heat starts increasing, plants like us, they also start sweating, right? So the stomata employs a second heat response that is almost like sweating, with reference to our own human bodies, right? So they release vapor. And this is actually one of the reasons why we have to understand that photosynthesis can be affected due to climate change and global warming. Hence, you can actually use this particular concept with reference to any question in mains. We can actually talk about the research which has taken place, and also there can be various potential prelims questions also based on this particular concept. In the next article, we'll be talking about the anti-cancer drugs to sport QR codes which will be preventing the duplicate drugs supplied in the market. This is a very important topic for our prelims, where we have to discuss the concepts related to economic and social development, and also for our GS2 when we have to look into the various issues pertaining to the health sector of our country. Now, when we talk about the recent move by the government of India to consider having QR codes on all medicines in the country, this is because of the rising amount of fake medicines in the nation. And this is, as we have seen, as of now, we have the various countries all around the world such as US, China, India and UK who are very much prone to the counterfeit drugs. And this has been proposed at a recent meeting of the Drugs Technical Advisory Board, where DTAB is a committee that is advising the Indian government on the various technical matters related to the Drugs and Cosmetics Acts. And this particular board is also a part of the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization, which is a very, very important national regulatory authority relating to the drugs regulation in the country. The head is actually the Drugs Controller General of India, and the main functions that they function is, firstly, they approve the new drugs, they conduct various clinical trials in India, they have various drug standards, they also have various import control restrictions, and also enforcement of various penal provisions in the country, and also having the important act of coordination, right? Now, what the government of India is thinking of, that to prevent the counterfeit drugs, which is threatening the various, say, cancer patients in the country, because in the name of cancer drugs, some generic medicines are being supplied, right? So this is where the counterfeits must be prevented, and a mandatory quick response, say, QR code will be brought in all of the medicines or in all of the say medical strips. A track and trace mechanisms will also be say designated, and this particular schedule H2 of the drugs rules is to be amended to include all the anti-cancer medicines and have higher amount of protection for this kind of medicines in the country. In the next article, we'll be looking into the recent center plan to have various initiatives for the urban poor. This is very important for our prelims sections, where we have to talk about the economic and social development, and for GS2 where we have to talk about various vulnerable sections of the population and welfare schemes taken for them. Now when we talk about this particular initiative, this is actually the new initiative to totally revamp something which we already have as Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana. That is a National Urban Livelihood Mission. And here the main aspect of say the DAYNULM is to have better amount of employment through skill and placement and training initiatives, to have better amount of capacity building and training programs for the urban poor. It is also to give support to the urban street vendors, shelters for the urban homeless, having various self-employment programs of say giving loans or say to boost entrepreneurships, also having social mobilization and institutional development. The main aspects that this particular initiative is using say various self-help groups and forming various say federations of the same. Urban poor who want to also set up their own on enterprises, they can also have a bank loan at say concession rates of interest, right? And also they will be supporting the urban local bodies and the state government for construction and operation of management of various shelters for the urban homeless people too. So here what the scheme is all about is actually being say a very important source of welfare initiative for the domestic workers, construction workers and the gig workers. What the government is trying to think is that we can have a second version of the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, right? And we can reorient them into having some common interest groups on the lines of self-help groups. We know that self-help groups are voluntary organizations of various people for economic purposes. So for on a similar model, we can have some common interest groups which will be kind of say loosely based organizations of various people, right, where they can have various social infrastructure initiatives, they can have various microfinance access with reference to the initiatives here. Now according to the officials here, the data of the National Food Security Act, the Labour Ministry's e-Shram portal. Now in the comment section, can you let me know what this e-Shram portal is all about? And also the building of other construction workers databases, they will be used to create the say list of people who will be benefiting from this project, right? Under this pilot project, which will be conducted in many cities in the country, common interest groups of different categories of workers are to be planned. What is to be done? They will be given some seed capital or some money to enable the lending between the members there, right? Creation of social infrastructure, including labor chokes for the construction workers, giving the beneficiary access to microfinance or microcredit of 4 lakh rupees. So these are the things which will be say money which will be given to the individuals. 20 lakh rupees will be given to the groups, right? And say they will also be enrolled into existing central welfare schemes if they are eligible. So this is a very good initiative which will be taken by the government of India. So moving on to the next article. Now in this article we have this joint exercise between India and Kazakhstan. This is taking place at Chamoli, and the main agenda of this particular exercise is to boost the cooperation between the armed forces between the two countries. Now this is a very important topic for your prelims, where we have to discuss about the current events of national and international importance. Now when we look at this particular exercise, right, we have to look at various other exercises which we have with other countries too. We will be looking under 3 headings: Indian Army, Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force. We have various countries in the list, as we can see here: Bangladesh, China, France, and also along the various other say Indian Navy list also. What we have to do, we have to pause the screen, we have to look into the various exercises, we have to actually associate the names with the various countries with which India conducts these military exercises. These military exercises are extremely important for the cooperation of the military forces of all across the world. And that is where we see that with reference to Indian Army, Bangladesh, China, right, France, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Russia, UK, USA, right, all of them are having some or other kind of military exercises with India. On the other side, Indian Navy is also involved in Malabar exercise, Varuna, Leporo, Sri Dragon, Konkan, AIMEN, IMDEX, Salvex, Slinex and Samudra Sakti. So please do look at the names of the countries also. Now here we also have, say, the Indian Air Force, which is also carrying the exercises of Veer Guardian between India and Japan. As we can see here, it conducts this exercise via Thailand, Philippines too, right? Pasix Orion are with France, Desert Flag 8 is with UAE, Cobra Warrior with UK, Cope India, INIOCHOS, then we have the Bright Star, right? So these are all the, say, exercises that we need to be concerned with the, say, prelims perspective, because we have found that in 2024 prelims we have a question with reference to exercise Mitra Shakti 2023. Please note that whichever exercises that take place between 2024 to 25, we have to know about which countries are involved. We have to know actually where say the location of this particular exercise are, and also the aim and objective of this particular exercise, right? So you please let me know what is the answer to this question in the comments below. In the last article, we'll be discussing about Rani Durgavati and her contributions towards India, because recently the Madhya Pradesh cabinet has actually denoted a lot of, say, programs with reference to Rani Durgavati. Now when we talk about her, she is a very important symbol of resistance against the Mughal Empire, because she apparently has defeated the Mughal army, right, more than once. And we have to understand, when it came to the reign and administration, she took over the administration of the Gondwana region, right, after the death of her husband. So she was maintaining a regency. Next, over a period of time, she proved her administrative prowess with good amount of social welfare initiatives and good amount of administration in the entire region. She also took a lot of initiatives for bettering the agricultural scenario in the region by having proper irrigation initiatives in the region too. She came into conflict with the Mughals when Asaf Khan in 1564 directly invaded the Gondwana region, and after this, at the Battle of Narai at 1564, she actually defeated the army quite a number of times, but finally she lost, and due to which she also self-immolated herself by sacrificing herself on fire. And that is where the term Johar is very important, because she committed Johar on June 24, 1564. And this is symbolizing a very well initiative taken by her, and a very good display of bravery displayed by her on the battlefield. And this is why Rani Durgavati is actually one of the courageous women that Indian history has ever seen. And her legacy is still continuing through her historic tales and her historic events, and also via the Rani Durgavati University at Madhya Pradesh, and also Government of India has denoted many stamps and museums in her name too. So I thank you all for being a very patient audience. All the best for the quiz that is following up. Please do attempt it, and all the best and best of luck for you till we meet again. Thank you.